in a minute. So if you could mute yourself and your video, and when I invite you to, hi Lauren.
Hi.
When I invite you to, please to share, please just unmute yourself and, you know, and take up and show yourself so that you can show, so that you're showing on the screen. Hi Jomo.
Hi, morning, Helene.
He's all the way from, is it Barbados?
Barbados, yes.
Yes, isn't that cool? Nice to have you join us.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start now in a minute. So if I would ask you to just shut your videos and mute yourself, and then unmute yourself again when I ask you to share and you want to share, okay? Great.
Hi.
So, hi, Karen.
Hi.
Okay, great. So hi Greta. So if you could
Hello.
all, great.
Hello.
So if you could all now, we're going to start. So if you could just shut your videos and mute yourself, and I will invite you from time to time again to, you know, reveal yourself. Yeah. Okay. Great. And we're going to start now. Okay, so let me start recording. Hi everyone, welcome back. It's good to see you all again. So many faces joining me again. Susie King, if you could take off your video, that would be great. The same, Anna, if you could take off the video.
Right.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. This is the second session of the EFT practice group. And I am Helene. I am a trainer, a supervisor, and a counselor. Hi, Isabel, in London. And the EFT practice group is organized by BEFT. So if you're on video, please, could you just shut the video down just for now? I'll invite you to put your video back on later. Thank you. So today, I'm going to be going through some of the skills of the Denton skill set. I mentioned some of them last time, and I'm going to take on 4 more, hopefully. Next week, so this is the BEFT series. Next week, Sarah's doing the reading group, and we're going to be reading chapter 5 of Laurie's Stepping into EFT. That's next week. Okay, and then we will have a break. So if you're not muted, please could you mute now, and also could you shut your video just for now? If Susie, if possible, if you could shut your video. Hazel as well, if you can. Great, thank you. Okay, so before we really kick off, can I remind you, this is not a supervision group, it's a practice group. So please, when I invite your comments, your observations, your questions, do remember not to say, I have a client, or what if your client says this? Really hold your client's confidentiality in mind. It's so important that we honor their confidentiality. It's not a supervision group. And this is going to go on YouTube where anyone can watch. And it would be awful if a client happened to watch your video and heard an example that was too specific that made them think, oh, she's talking about me, or he's talking about me. So just say something general like, so what if you have a situation like this where, and make it generic, okay, so that we can really honor our clients. My intention with this group is really, how do we get practical? How do we actually practice the skills? And what are the challenges and what are the obstacles we run into? And that could just be executive skills like, I don't know how to do this, but also it could be self of the therapist, like, oh, I really struggle with withdrawals because I'm a pursuer, things like that. It's really how to develop our practice. So that's my intention. Last time I talked about, here, let me just share my screen. Here we go. Here we go, from current slide. So I hope that you can see it. Let me pin the video, show the video panel. So last time, I just did a quick review of the EFT Tango, And I'm just going to do it again one more time before I go into the actual skills, because we have people who are joining us who have not managed to do the externship because we had to cancel. And I guess really you can never be reminded enough the importance of the tango. The tango is what we therapists do to facilitate our clients getting into their emotions and being able to really process it and share it with their partners. And later on in a minute, we're going to talk about the skills, the actual micro skills that enable us to do these big moves. The first move is just you're reflecting what you're seeing happen in front of you. It's very much you're using present tense. You know you're not doing present process when you're talking in past tense about the then and there. It's when you bring it alive in the room, when you actually mirroring back to the client in a very non-judgmental, non-evaluative, very descriptive way what you see happening in front of you. Either within the internal drama, the internal struggle, attachment struggle, or between them. And then once we've done that and we've got a kind of a story going on about the internal drama or the interpersonal drama, then we want to drop onto something on an emotional piece and go a little bit deeper. And that's what we call move 2, when you pick up the pieces, the different elements of emotion. Okay, here we go. The different elements of emotion and deepen it. And we will talk about how we do that, because actually that's the skill we're really going to be working with today. We're going to be working very much about what are the skills that we can use to deepen affect and assemble affect. And next round, we're going to actually go deeper into the skills of choreographing engaged encounters. How do we move it from the personal to the interpersonal? Help the client send a clear message to their partner or to a part of themselves, right? And then we will process the encounter, what it was like to share, what it was like to hear, and then we will summarize what has just happened. Because remember, emotion happens so fast, and the dance between the couple is the attachment dance. All of this is so fast that actually, when you're the one experiencing it, it's actually hard to really notice and integrate and take in what's happening in the moment. So the 5th move of the tango is so useful to keep doing as you go along, because as you're summarizing, you're helping the clients create a coherent story, and you're also helping them take in the new experience. Okay. So, hi Ines. If you could shut down, oh great, she did it. Okay, so can you remember last month, we talked about the first skill, the alliance making and maintenance. We talked about how we validate each partner, and we talked about continuously reframing the problem in terms of the cycle. Now, that's when it gets a bit challenging, because then the cycle is what plays out between the couple when they can't connect safely. And when we talk about skill 4, which is managing of a couple's interaction, that's really a challenge. That's probably the art of couple therapy. How do you hold two people securely in a way that neither of them feels invalidated by the statements you're making, whether you're reflecting present process, whether you're talking about their behavior, their coping strategy? That's skill 4. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things I had to learn to manage when working with couples. I'll tell you why as I discuss it. We're also hopefully going to talk about skill 5, how we process emotion, skill 6, how we work with primary emotions, and skill 7, when we do all that, how we place the emotions back into the cycle. That's as far as I imagine I'll get today. And then next time, we're going to do skill 8, enactments. And I hope to be able to show you how you do enactments with parts of self. In other words, EFT, when you're working not just with a couple, but also when you're working with individuals, how you do enactments with parts of self. And we're going to talk about how to manage the defensive responses that happen when couples can't connect safely. We might also get to do the other skills, I don't know, but let's see what happens next time. So let's remember, emotion. In EFT, emotion is both the target and the agent of change. We don't see emotion as being the problem. We see emotion as actually our ally that's going to help us create change. Why is that? Because we're trying to create a corrective emotional experience in each session. Two things come to mind for me when we think about emotion is both the target and agent of change. that is that sometimes my sessions, I really cannot find an emotion. When I reflect back on the session, I think, oh, wow, what emotion was most alive in the session? And I realized that I've gotten lost in content. So really thinking about the fact that emotion is the target and agent of change helps you from time to time ask yourself, actually, what emotion is alive here? What's actually coming alive here? Am I really working with emotions? I'm going to talk about the experiences scale as I talk about the skills, because that's a way to gauge, are you actually targeting emotion, and are you actually using it as an agent of change? Because one of the things we keep saying in EFT is that we want to create a corrective emotional experience. And I used to always just assume I knew what that meant. But as time went on, I realized I don't actually know. I'm just saying it as if I know it. But what do we really mean by that? And that means really to expose the client under more favorable circumstances to emotional situations which he or she could not handle in the past. The patient is helped to undergo a corrective emotional experience suitable to repair the traumatic influence of previous experiences. And what does that mean? That means that they have an experience of connection, of being held in the emotional experience. Those emotions that were overwhelming, that they couldn't handle in the past, that they have a soothing experience, that they have an experience of processing their emotions in a way that feels good to them. And that's what's corrective. Whether it's from accessing it safely and being able to share it with their partner, that's what creates the corrective emotional experience. I'm going to talk about these in a moment, but let me just move on to talking about managing a couple's interaction. So, what do we mean when we talk about managing a couple's interaction? It's actually our number one role is to create safety in session, right? That's the goal. We want to create safety for our couple in session. We want them to have an oasis of safety where they can interact with each other and share heart to heart in a way that they don't alienate themselves from each other. And how do we do that as therapists? We try to maintain the focus on emotions, on the cycle. In other words, not one partner being the problem, but the cycle, the negative cycle being in problem, and attachment. That means we have to be able to contain the secondary reactions of maybe one partner or both partners if they're very reactive. And we also have to be able to draw out the silent partner. So if we keep the focus in session on emotions, on attachment, that we're looking through at what's happening in front of us through the lens of attachment, and if we are able to track the cycle as it's happening, then we move away from superficial content issues, which is a part of therapy. Couples need to feel heard. They need to be able to tell the story. But if that's all that's happening, we're not doing our couples a service, right? They've not come to rehash old stories. They've come to us for a corrective emotional experience, and venting and retelling stories and not helping them drop a bit deeper, not being a mirror to help them see what's playing out between them that keeps them apart. We're not helping them. So the goal is we want to accept, we want to acknowledge, we want to validate these secondary reactions and make sense of them using attachment lens, because people protest because they're trying to connect, and it's the best way they know how. Whether it's from accusing, demanding, blaming, the intention is still, to try and reach their partner, to try and connect. So if we cut them off prematurely and we do not let them have enough space to express what's going on for them in terms of the secondary reactions, they're not going to feel heard. They're going to feel cut off. They're going to feel judged. So part of managing the couple's interaction is finding that balance where you allow therapeutic expression, but at the same time, you take them somewhere better, right? You're not disrespectful, but you're also coming in and providing a safe space to talk about the issues on a whole different level. Now, what are the challenges around this? I find, for instance, is sometimes I let the secondary reactions run too far and I can't come in. I just can't get in because it's a runaway train, right? I haven't contained it early enough, right? I've allowed it to go too far. Now the couples are they're just a runaway train. Both people are too activated. Their brains have gone online and I can't reach them. That's usually what's happened. I have let it go too far. So part of managing a couple's interaction is finding that balance where you're able to let them express some of those secondary reactions, validate them, acknowledge them, and then go deeper. Another thing that gets in the way of being able to track a couple's interaction in a helpful way is when the session becomes sort of like there are too many jokes, there are too many interruptions, they interrupt each other and, they keep changing the subject, they keep exiting. And it just derails the session and it goes from being about process to just being about stories and content. And also another thing we have to notice is conflict in the room is not just when couples have raised voices. A lot can be said non-verbally. People can raise their eyebrows, people can turn, people can be dismissive of what their partner says in a very calm voice. So what are we trying to do when we're trying to manage a couple's interaction? We're basically trying to intervene whenever they're interrupting each other, not hearing each other, missing each other, or not really receiving and hearing and taking in what's being shared. That tells us there's some kind of block and we have to come in. So part of managing a couple's interaction is keeping the balance so that you're containing the reactivity of the pursuer, but also drawing out the withdrawer, making space for their experience, drawing them out. Now, I'm going to check in with you now, but I know, for instance, my biggest challenge is interruptions. I just had to learn how to be bold, brave, and come in respectfully and interrupt when people are interrupted, like become an interrupter myself, because it's not okay to allow that to keep happening. It's actually, we have to come in and say, can I slow you down? What just happened there? You were saying this, and then you sort of came in. We have to replay what just happened. We have to acknowledge it. We have to be able to say, hang on, I really want to hear from you, but can I just let her finish, hear from one person at a time? The general rule, the general expression we use is, or principle we use is connect, correct, and lead. That's the way to handle interruptions. So connect means you interrupt with a validation or a reflection or a reframe. You can say something like, I can see you're trying really hard to tell him how to reach you. And I can also see that you guys are getting into your cycle right now. And I really want to create a safe space for both of you. Can we go back to, now when I say, can we go back to, I'm refocusing on an emotion or I'm refocusing on an element of the cycle and I'm taking the lead. Yeah. But now I'd like to stop the share and come back to you and really hear from you. Please unmute yourself and your video if you want to be seen, and just come in. What are your observations? What tends to happen for you in the counseling room that gets in the way of just being able to create that safe space where people can share?
I'm going to share, Helen. And that one question, it came to me when it says to contain the reactive secondary emotion. And
yes,
that's for me in a reactive couple. How can I bring myself in that position to maintain the secondary emotion, which is I'm a little bit unknown. So if you highlight part for me, I heard you saying how to mirror him and acknowledge, validate, and go deeper. But in actual there, it's a when it's active, not passive one. It's more you can do it, but with the active one, that's where I want to handle it, and I feel like I'm lost there sometimes.
Yes, well, thank you for coming in with that, because that's probably one of the hardest things, right? When couples are very reactive, something can happen for us
Yeah.
that makes it hard for us to come in. There are all kinds of blocks that can come in. I know for me, sometimes I go into my what I call television mode, as if I'm watching live act, as if I'm watching a movie rather than part of the session itself. It's almost like it overwhelms me so much.
Yeah.
I am away from it. I'm just watching it happen. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And other times I might just be a little bit afraid of, how do I come in? There's a lot of heat here. How do I cool it down? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. So I would like to hear from others too, but let me give my first answer and then throw it open to the floor, because when I see a couple beginning to flare up, right, I want to allow enough of, let me see what's really happening here. Let me see if I can get a bit of it, but I don't want it to really take off and become too heated. So I want to come in with a reflection and validation, and I will demonstrate or reframe. And how I can demonstrate that is, Dilnia, let's just use you. Can I use you to model it?
Yeah.
Right. So Dilnia, I can see you're really upset and you're trying really hard to get your point across. You really want to be heard here. I can see how upsetting it is for you to feel like your partner's not listening to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a reflection of what's happening, a validation, right? And also kind of reframe, you're trying really hard to be heard. So it's about the intent of the behavior. You know, I can see your voice is getting louder.
Mm-hmm.
That's just descriptive. I'm not telling the person off. I'm not judging their behavior. I'm just describing your voice is getting louder. And I often say I can see you're speaking faster, right?
Mm.
Just describe it. I can see this, I can really hear in your voice how upsetting this is, right? But if you just describe the behavior and you don't offer some kind of acknowledgement of the intention, of the motive behind the behavior, the person might feel judged, right?
And Helen, is it make a difference when you are in Zoom and when you are in front of you? Because in a Zoom, how to bring them down, that's important as well, because you are not physically in front.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. It's a little bit harder when you don't have your physical presence, which is why you do want to come in sooner, right? But your voice is so powerful. And this is the thing. When you connect with someone, you meet them where they are. If someone is agitated, I'm not going to use risk voice. That's not connecting. Risk voice, by which I mean simple, soft, slow voice. I can see how upset you are. This is so upsetting. Can I slow you down? I can hear it. Of course you're upset, right? Anyone would be upset if they didn't feel heard. I'm still using that example, right?
Okay. Yeah, I get
So
it.
to connect means to really connect on all levels. Match the energy. We're saying we're not matching the anger, but we're matching the energy.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
A client will feel very misattuned if you come in with, I can see how upsetting this is for you.
Yeah.
Right? You match the energy and then you make a correction and you lead. And by the correction, you do a sort of process replay. Hey guys, look what's happening right here. Right?
Thank you.
You're getting more and more worked up and you're beginning to shut down. Usually you're getting loud and I can see you're beginning to check out. Are you still with us? Right? You reflect what's happening. The process replays, you just reflect what's happening, but you try and offer some kind of intention, a reframe of intention, because remember, the behavior usually has an intention, a good intention, even though the impact is the opposite of what's intended. But would anybody else like to add to that?
Yes. I'd like to ask something. What if you have people and one of them is showing through body language that they don't want to be there, that they're finding the whole process rather irritating, and that they're yawning and they're turning away, and I will get a fear that if I address this, it will escalate it rather than some advice about dealing with, this is I have some, someone who was sort of
okay. So be careful. Don't be specific.
Yes.
Mhm.
People who think that they don't really do emotions. They don't do emotions, and this is very hard for them, and it's irritating, and they don't really want to be there. But they
Yes. Well, so first of all, if some people will actually say it, won't they? They will say, I don't really want to be here. I'm here because of she wants to be here, right? The first thing that will happen with such a statement is, then I really want to acknowledge you for being here, right? Your wife is so important to you that even though this is not your cup of tea, you're coming because she matters. So already there's a validation if they're very explicit about it. I would really acknowledge, because I mean it. If you really don't believe in therapy and you don't like doing emotions and you still show up for your partner, I think that's a beautiful thing. So it's very easy for me to acknowledge and validate that because I genuinely believe, great, that's wonderful. But the other thing is, how do you address someone being disengaged in a non-judgmental way? That's what you're talking about, right? Like, how do I address the fact that they're yawning, they're not really turning? Well, the first thing is a check-in, right? What's happening for you, right? You can just check in what's happening for you, right? Because what could happen is, because you're afraid of shaming them, because you're afraid of escalating it, you actually withdraw. You don't engage. You join their disengagement, right? You're afraid to move forward and just check in. Hey, Tony, or hey, Rebecca, what's happening for you right now as we talk about blah, blah, blah? Hmm? So you check in, you don't disengage yourself. But does anyone want to add what they do in situations like that? Does anybody want to share what they do in situations like that?
Yeah, I could say something. I think I come alongside them, so kind of give them a sense of checking in with them and seeing if I can get where they're at. I may offer some conjectures.
Great, yeah.
Gently to try that out with them and check in with them whether I'm getting it right, and just see if I can sort of overall empathize with what they're expressing bodily.
Beautiful. Conjecturing what it's like for them, right? And what do you think happens? The client feels seen. Even if you got it wrong, they can see how hard you are trying to engage with them by your conjecture. Is it like this? Is it like that? Right? Even if you can't, you dig deep and look for empathy inside you. What would it be like for you to be in therapy in this moment when you don't actually do emotions? This might be I have a sense this is really hard for you, right? It's not easy for you to be here. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more what's going on for you? Yeah. Great, Nick. That was a nice input, right? Just conjecturing. And it's really about, don't disengage when the client is disengaged, and don't shame them either. Really appreciate that it's hard for them. Yeah, they're telling you, they're enacting with their body what they can't say. Yeah. Sarah, do you want to add something to that?
I was just going to say, validating reluctance, and sort of, what I often do is just say, well, you know what, I think I would be reluctant if I was in your shoes. Just kind of helping them understand that it kind of makes sense. And it's along the lines of every behavior, even body language and stuff makes sense in context. So
beautiful.
Acknowledging that.
That's right, that every dysfunction has a function in context, right? And it helps people say that which is hard to say. And that's where I love present process, because you're thinking, actually, probably this is really hard for this person to be here. Now that's your thought, that's your present process. You just find a gentle way to reflect that back. It must be really hard for you to be here. Actually, present process is stating the obvious in a way that's non-evaluative, non-judgmental, and purely descriptive. Yeah? Great. So, if anybody else wants to say something or add something else, yeah.
Helena, just to reflect some comments,
Yeah.
like people talking about understanding it and understanding that kind of validation, but kind of finding it hard to sort of pull that in the moment.
Okay. So finding it hard to pull out, to actually think of how do I validate this reactivity or this disengagement in the moment. Yeah. Would somebody like to say something about what stops it or what blocks it? Is it a fear of saying it the wrong way? Because often people will say, I'm afraid of saying something in a way that will either sound judgmental or shaming. Did someone say something? Okay, no. So I really appreciate how hard it is to come in with something that's soothing and validating when there's so much reactivity, or the opposite end of the spectrum, when there's a lot of disengagement. And what really helps me with that is the attachment lens. I see this person in that moment as struggling, and that really is helpful for me. I see it as some kind of, either in the case of a pursuer, there's emoting out loud like that, is a struggle. That person is struggling. Or the person who's shutting down and going quiet and disengaging, they're in a kind of struggle. And that I am not a referee, I'm not a judge. I'm literally there to hold two different experiences. And by reflecting it and by validating it, by saying, the simplest thing is, I can see how hard this is. This is difficult, right? I can see how upsetting this is. That if I can in some way just reflect to this person, I see you, I hear you, that person will feel heard, even if they're not saying a word, say the word. So in the instance that Nick gave, if you're guessing at what's going on for the withdrawal, even if you were guessing wrong, they're feeling seen and heard. That's soothing. That creates a sense of safety. If you're the person that's reacting really strongly, and I meet you in your reaction, with energy, I mean, not with anger, you feel not alone in it. And that in itself is soothing. I'm seen, I'm heard. So it is hard, and I would say it takes practice. It's one of the hard things of couple therapy, I think, is to come in and hold two people simultaneously that are going in opposite directions, that are in a different space. So I really acknowledge it's a hard thing to do, yeah? And it takes practice, and the more we allow ourselves to be human and make mistakes and come in and own up, oops, I got that wrong, and keep going, the easier it gets. So, yeah. So shall I move on to the next skill? Yeah? Oh, okay, Lauren, yeah?
Sorry, wrong button. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing.
Yeah. I'm wondering also, when I get caught up in the reactivity and the speed at which things are unraveling, what I'm beginning to find useful is when I notice that happening, that I kind of interrupt gently and say, I'm going to slow this right down.
Yeah.
Let's stop a moment. Let's just slow this right down and unpack it. You know, just grabbing something, because otherwise I just get caught in this kind of tornado, you know, and it's very easy to just let it run away.
Beautiful, Lauren.
Yeah.
We match their energy. We come in with the same energy, and then we take them slowly down with our voice.
Yeah.
Right? And actually, the sooner you come in, the less dysregulated you get, right?
Yeah.
That's very helpful. Yeah. Sarah, yeah?
I'm really fond of the idea of leading and following. So, you know, kind of following them for a little bit, and then you kind of do what Lauren said, like slow you down and lead a little bit, and then, you know, after that, the next thing is following and then leading. This kind of back and forth between those two.
The dance between leading and following, right? Like first you have to join, or else you can't lead from the back, right? You have to join, and then you can lead, and then you can step back, yeah, leading and following, right? And you know, the voice, our voices are so powerful. How do you match someone with the same energy? And once you've matched them with your voice, even if it's online, then you can drop. And when you drop, they too slow down. And when I say drop, I just mean, I can see how upsetting this is for you. Can I slow you down? Because you know, guys, what's happening here is, so I've matched with energy and then I've dropped. Physiologically, they will drop as well, yeah? Great. So I want to share my screen again and move to the next skill, because working with emotions is our bread and butter, right? So we're going to talk about processing emotions. That's our bread and butter. That's what we're doing a lot in EFT, yeah? And that's probably one of the hard things to do. Here we go. Why is this not working? Okay, here we go. So I've talked about that. There we go. So in EFT, we're trying to track emotion, we're trying to follow emotion, we're trying to create a corrective emotional experience. I like to think about it in two different ways. Accessing emotion, which is what we're doing a lot in step 3. We're helping people touch down on their emotions and begin to become aware of their emotions, and you know, begin to become curious about what's going on inside of them. Now, in stage 1 and in step 3, we are trying to help people just begin to name their emotions, because remember, there's a lot of reactivity. And Sue, in her book, Attachment Theory in Practice, first started talking about the experiencing scale. You can see these numbers across the screen. What I really want to talk about when we talk about processing emotion is, we want to help people access their emotions. Hang on a minute, let me do something here. Pin, show video panel. Okay, so we want to help people access their emotions, begin to name these emotions, and begin to make sense out of it using the cycle and their attachment needs and longings. Now, why is it that people don't go there naturally? Because they haven't had safe experiences. They haven't been mirrored. They have had experience in the past where they learned that emotion wasn't safe to feel, wasn't safe to express. And they've learned to begin to avoid their emotions, or just keep away from it, or touch it and then react so strongly to it that all you see and all they themselves experience is their secondary reactions to their emotions. So when we talk about accessing emotions, we're trying to help people access the more primary vulnerable feelings inside of them, and the ones that they themselves are not really fully in touch with. In stage 2, step 5, they don't just get to know and say hello to their emotions. They actually begin to accept it, to know it in detail, to really embody it. And when I say embody, I mean really feel into it. Maybe what we call focusing, Gendling calls focusing, and actually begin to see it, integrate it as part of who they are. It's no longer something that's avoided. They've befriended this feeling, they're aware of it, and they can actually express it to their partner. So the reason when we first started talking about the emotional scale, I thought, oh no, not another list I have to learn, right? But actually in time, on just a practical level, this is a practice group. On a practical level, I've actually begun to find it quite helpful to think in terms of what level of experiencing is going on in the room. So in stage 1, we tend to have a lot of 2 and 3s. Now, 2 is where there's a lot of storytelling. This is when people come and they really want to tell you a lot of content and stories. And that's okay. That is part of building a therapeutic alliance. But you don't want to stay there forever. You also want to, like we talked, refocus towards emotion, attachment, the cycle. Now that's sort of 2, that kind of storytelling, very focused on external events. Now in 3, level 3, people are beginning to name emotions, but more in terms of behavior. In other words, more in terms of their coping strategies. I freeze, I flee, I get angry, I criticize. They're beginning to own the action tendency part of emotions. And or they're beginning to label it. So the key thing is, if someone says, I feel sad, if you say to someone, what's it like for you when your partner leaves the room? Oh, I feel sad. That is just a level 3. They are not necessarily feeling it in the room. And what we're always trying to get to, and this is what's useful in terms of the experiences scale, you're trying to get to level 4, where someone is having the experience and able to reflect on it and share it in the room. And, you know, for some people, that takes quite a while before they're able to not just label their emotions or just talk about what they do with it, but actually also feel it and be able to feel it in the moment and be able to share it with their partner. So this level 4, 2 and 3, storytelling, reactivities. Level 3 is also a lot of reactivity. People are being reactive. People are making all kinds of attributions about their partner. 2 and 3 is perfectly normal in stage 1. And we still want to help people. We want to bring the emotion alive in the room. So when we are saying to someone, so what's it like, what's happening for you right now as you talk about this, as you say, I can never please her, or as you say, I'm not important enough. What you're doing there is you're trying to bring it into level 4. You're trying to make the person aware of what they're feeling in the moment and bring it alive. And how do we do that? Let's go back. We track the elements of emotion. We track the trigger. What is it that triggers the emotion? What is the threat? So people will say something like, oh, you know, I get upset when, you know, my partner is disappointed in me. Well, that still doesn't tell you enough of what is the trigger, what is the threat, what is it about their partner being disappointed that is triggering. So what is the appraisal they're making? What's the conclusion they're drawing that makes it a threat? So a lot of EFT is about getting very specific, being very curious about what is it that is the threat. We know with attachment, the whole fight and flee response comes from a perception of a threat. Either that your partner is, you know, attacking you, leaving you, abandoning you, rejecting you in some way. So we want to get specific. And then we want to ground it into the body. Can you feel it now in your body as you say, I am not important. I can never get it right. I'm the problem. You help people, you grab onto an emotional handle, and an emotional handle is just a clue. Clients rarely just say, oh, I feel sad and I'm feeling it right now in my chest. That's our role, to actually grab onto an emotionally laden statement or an attachment laden statement, and then help ground it in the felt sense, in the present. So if I go back to this, you could say that level 5 is you've accessed an emotion in 4, the level 4, and now 5, and this happens a lot in stage 2, you direct their attention inwards, and it's what we would call focusing. Gendeling's focusing has very much been incorporated into EFT. So it's when you're asking a person to embody the feeling, to get very curious. What does it feel like? It's the open edge of the experience. It's not ready, like a ready meal that you can just toss in the microwave. They can't give you a clear answer. We have to slow down and get them to really tune inside and begin to be curious. And when you've done enough of the exploring in 5 and you've tracked the action tendency, the meaning they make, all of that, you get to a level 6 where it becomes very conclusive. The person knows, right, this is what I'm feeling, this is why I'm feeling it, they can fully own it. And that's is very vivid and alive for them. That's a level 6. So in stage 2, we're very much hoping to be doing rounds of 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. And in stage 1 of EFT, where there's a lot of reactivity, we're hoping to touch on 4, feel emotion, link it to the cycle, link it to the coping strategy. Some people may wonder about level 7. Level 7 is when you just, in general, trust your experience and you listen to yourself and you listen to your experience and you trust it. And you're able to use and access the messages that your emotions tell you. However, level 7 is not something that we can always be in. It's not realistic. So what is it that makes it hard to work like this? What is it that makes it hard to access emotions? Well, let me start by fessing up myself. Let me start by confessing my challenge. We talked about the different elements of emotion. One of my biggest challenges is staying in the body channel. I like meaning making. Oh, I love meaning making. I love action tendencies because I love to know how people cope with their difficult emotions and what it says to them. I love all of that. I like to know the trigger. What is it that is the threat? What is it? But to then ground it and stay in the body and slow it down. That's my learning curve. It's not that I don't do it, but I don't do it enough. I know I don't do it enough. I know I could linger longer in the body. And this brings me to something, this is self of the therapist. It took me a long time to learn to tune into my body. I was always in my head. So when I was in therapy, when I was training, I was in therapy and the therapist would ask me about my body. I'd actually get annoyed with the therapist because I felt like a sense of failure, like they're asking me something I can't feel. So that's one of the reasons I'm cautious with clients. I'm always like, oh, I don't want them to feel like inadequate, like they can't do this body thing. And I've learned with time that what we want to do is stretch the window of, if you like, capacity in all the different channels, right? So it doesn't mean that I have to kill them with the body. If somebody's struggling with accessing the body, doesn't mean you shy away from it completely. You just gradually expand that channel. So raising awareness around the trigger, about the body, the felt sense, the sensations in the body, raising awareness of action tendencies, behaviors, the meaning people make, slowing it down enough so that people are actually aware of what they think in those moments. Because remember, the threat is always in your own head. You perceive it through your own thoughts. So slowing things down enough so that people begin to do all that. And just trusting that if I just stay and I pause enough and I make that statement over and over, can we slow it down? Can I hold you here for a moment? You just said, I'll never be able to get it right. Can we stay there? Because that feels really important. That trusting that by slowing it down or staying, can we stay here? Can I hold you there? That something will emerge, something new, something different, something deeper. So now I want to throw it open to the floor. What are some of the issues around this? And what are the things that help? What have you discovered that helps you? Can you share with us? We can all learn together. This is a practice group. Or what are some of the observations you've made in this working with emotion? Yeah. What are some of the things that helped you with your blocks? Or what questions do you have? So the mic is open. Join me. Reveal yourself. You can unmute yourself. Yeah.
So Aniko has a comment on the chat. She says, it's an interesting insight, staying in the body for me. Perhaps the connection to trauma and trauma memory in the body. The somatic work is very essential. The tender feelings that may come up for me and for my client. Again, self-compassion and the soothing techniques and exercises. The energy changes in the whole room when the body shifts. This can be the heart of the corrective experience, perhaps.
That's beautiful, Aniko, because that's what we are wanting. We're wanting a limbic revision, right? We're wanting people to feel it differently in their body, right? And when people have been through a wave of emotion and completed it, whether it be sadness, whether it be fear, whether it be pain, as hard as that has been, it's almost like you hear this sigh. There's a relief that comes from being held all the way to process it to completion. And that's what leads to that limbic revision. And if we do not go to those levels, the changes on an intellectual level is not on where your body remembers it differently, so to speak. Yeah. So thank you very much, Anika. That was helpful.
I think, thank you. And I think there's a cultural piece here too. because I think that how we think about, like, I think of some of these moments of, in a way, this kind of archetypal moment, like almost like a wedding, and we're connected to this feeling of change, or and I think that culturally, you know, paying attention to these silent, like you were saying, like when the emotion starts to live in the room. The theatre background, like a lot of the EFT do, I think that we're more used to that. Cultural element, what does it feel like when, and I think that for me that does have there are certain moments where it's culturally acceptable to be more aware of what does it feel like in the actual room, in the space.
Yes.
You know, you know, so we're very much so when we start to have these healing moments, when I first saw the videos of what was happening with the couples, and I feel it, even watching the videos, you feel there's this heart connection and the energy in the room changing. And how have we experienced and spoken about that, perhaps in when we're singing in a choir together, or we're having you know, that moment in the theatre when there's a couple on stage or two people and you have that moment and everybody in the audience is with them. And so a lot of what you're sharing today about working with emotion kind of really touches on how skilled are we really in our awareness, how have we been really allowed to experience, have these kinds of archetypal, I use Jungian archetypal language, but so that was really just your language about this was really kind of so thank you, that's my
Thank you very much, because what you're saying is really important, Aniko. Like how much have we been around emotion? Like how much has emotion been named and expressed for us? Like if you grew up in a family where emotions weren't really talked about, right? You've grown up with a different level of exposure to emotions, and you're comforted and adjusting to it, right? Like it, not just even cultural, like, but even family cultures, right? Like to what extent have you grown up with emotional expression, and what kind of emotions were allowed in your family? Was anger allowed, right? Was sadness, were you allowed to be sad? You know, are we a happy clappy family? Sarah's raising her hand. What would you say?
Well, I think that this is a really good point, because I know for me, it always felt quite risky to sort of dive into the body, and it was, I think in a way it was only when I might have done my own work around diving into my own body did I become a little bit bolder in sort of going there with others. And that's not to say everybody has to do that, but I think it does. You are sort of like taking a risk to ask those kinds of questions, and then not only that, to know what to do with it when you get there.
Exactly. Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. That is so true. And Deborah, yes.
Yeah, I think in my experience, you know, clients that don't do emotion. And their struggle to name emotion, I think inviting them not to worry initially about naming the specific emotion, but to be able to name a sensation like a tightness or a clench or a brace is quite a nice bridge to support those that are really emotionally illiterate, to be able to realize that actually, I can feel. I know what a tension is in the shoulder, or a tightness in the throat, and therefore I think it gives them some confidence that they can name emotion, because they're just bundles of sensation and tension patterns in the body.
So now that's beautiful. I can now link what Sarah had just offered with what you just said, because Sarah said, so when you it wasn't until I did my own work that I knew that I had felt confident to dive into the body, right? And also, once I got more comfortable with that, then it's easier to do it with others, right? You're talking about how to make it easier for the client, like a sensation. Now, you just added 2 words that I'm just going to steal right away, because I normally say tightness. You said, was it a clench? Was it like a brace? You added some extra vocabulary to use in describing sensations. I love that. Now, the link in the 2 is, once you've got to a sensation, we're not stuck in the body. We're looking at everything through attachment lens. So when Sarah's saying, what do we do with it? We don't want to just keep drilling down the body and not make sense and organize it in attachment sense, right? So when you feel that clench in your heart and you feel your stomach drop, what does that say to you? What does that mean? Right? So you want to make a link to them, the strategy they use to deal with that emotion, because that's what their partner sees. Their partner only sees the strategy. In fact, they only see their strategy. They only see themselves leaving the room. You've helped them link, oh, when I feel that clench in my chest, I tell myself, she's going to get me. She's trying to get me. And I leave the room. Ooh, now that's a much more coherent picture. That's the fullest story of the emotion. And that's why it's so important to learn. We want to expand the different channels, whether it be body, whether it be meaning making, whether it be the action tendency. We want to expand the different channels and we want to integrate and join it up. That's how you create a much more complete sense of, yes, this is what I'm feeling. This is what it's about. This is where it comes from. This is what I do with it. Does that make sense? Yeah. But I like that because I'm very mindful of people in the body, because I've learned to be aware of my body, but I knew how long it took. I'm very mindful. I don't soak people in it. I just sort of like, I'm going to sprinkle you with a little bit of this today, and I'm going to come back and sprinkle a little bit more next time, and gradually expand your awareness. I'm not going to donk you and hold you down there and make you feel like you're a failure. Yeah. But just help you do exactly what you described, Debbie. Just begin to help them become aware of the sensations, right? And just begin to become aware of the body and to link it to something. The beauty of it is link the elements. If you take nothing away about when you arrive at an emotion, what do I do now? Think, what do I link it to? What have I already explored that I can link it to? Oh, I've already explored the action tendency. Now I can link it to the action tendency. Oh, now I can link to the meaning making. Now I can summarize. Oh, I've got this, this, that. So access, expand. How do you expand? You just stay there. Get comfortable with silence. Get comfortable with pausing. Get comfortable with allowing the birthing of an experience. It takes time for an experience to emerge, and you cannot decide any more than the client when it's going to emerge. So create this space. Sarah, yeah.
I had put something on the chat that said, you know, even validating feeling nothing or validating feeling numb.
Yes.
So Karen has a question. When they are numb, how do I work with that, please? That's Karen's question.
Right. Exactly the same thing. What does it feel like to be numb? Is it empty? You can conjecture. Is it like an emptiness? Is it like a hollow feeling? Right? Numb is an experience. So use the same curiosity you would use, right? And remember, for withdrawers, we do a lot more scaffolding. We do a lot more conjecturing for them. Is it like this or is it more like that? Even that, you give them a sense of power, like, okay, I can say, no, it's not like this, it's more like that. Ah, it's more like this. Okay. So is it more like this or more like that? You see how you just keep on gently expanding it a little bit. But that was a great question. Numb is an experience. That is so good that you can describe that, right? That is more like a numbness. Already the person feels like, oh, okay, I can do numbness. Right? That's already something. Yeah, great, thank you. So, does anybody else want to add something or ask something about emotions? Because
I would just like to ask something, if I may.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, everything you've just been saying has been so helpful.
Oh, lovely.
but there's just one thing that has come up for me is when a client says, when they've been speaking in a very, very emotional way, and I ask them where they're feeling it in their body, it's like a complete blank, and it's all in my head.
Okay, so what does your head say? I like to join people where they are first, and then take them somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, right. I tend to just like to join people where they. Okay, so you're feeling it more in your head. What is it? What's that like? What's going through your mind? What are you saying to yourself? Right. So the person might say, I'm saying to myself, you know, no matter what I do, I'll never be able to be the kind of wife or husband she wants. Repeat. Okay, so how do we work with emotions? This is the next bit, working with primary emotions. That's the next skill we were going to talk about, which is how do you work with primary emotions, is the RISK acronym, where R stands for repeat, yeah? So repeat, just I will never be able to be the kind of husband or wife she wants. That sounds really painful. What happens for you as you, and I often just drop the word body and say, what happens inside as you say, I'll never be able to be. So repeat, just reflect it, pause, allow space for the emotion to actually begin to rise and come up and bubble, right? So I like to meet people where they are and then take them down, just like when you match the energy of the anger and then you take the person down. So now the how of the emotions. You all know that unfortunately, for some reason, I did not put the acronym down. But the acronym down it is, I think because I just assume everybody has it, but you don't probably. R stands for repeat. Then I stands for images. Use the client's own words and images and really flesh out that imagery for them, yeah? Use their own imagery. If they say it's like a knife in the heart, don't say it feels like your heart's breaking. Say it's like a knife in the heart. Because the closer you stay to people's own words and images, they don't have to leave their experience to come and translate your own. They can stay where they are, right? Now, this is so crucial. The bit in the middle. So the acronym, the how of working with emotions is risk. And the S, there are 3 S's: simple, soft, slow. And that goes back to what Lauren was saying. She matches them and then she drops her voice. Now you go soft. The key thing to remember is all of this is not, it's an intervention, but it's the stance you come from that matters. If you really try allow yourself to feel into where the client is and imagine what it must be like to feel like you will never be the person your partner wants. Naturally, your voice will soften and slow. You will, if you allow yourself to dig in with them and feel what it's like for them in their own world, you won't just be using a technique. I think the main thing about the acronym is don't use it as a technique. Use yourself, use your empathy. Try and imagine the times when you felt like you could never be something for someone important in your life. That will naturally slow you down, soften you, because if not, it feels like, I totally understand when supervisors say it feels artificial. It feels artificial if you're just using it as a technique. It's different if you're using attunement, your own attunement, and you feel into what it's like for the client. And sometimes I'll sit in session and I'll think, oh my God, I'm not feeling anything. That means I'm tuned out. I haven't fully arrived into the session. I'm not usually, I realize I'm still thinking, what will I cook for dinner? I haven't done the shopping. Right, somewhere that's buzzing in the mind, and I have to remind myself to bring myself fully into the room, because if not, I would be feeling their words. But we are trying to let their words land inside of us and feel it. Because sometimes supervisors will say to me, how did you know to go with that emotional handle? How did you know that that statement was packed with emotion? And I'll say, because I'm trying to always imagine as the words are landing, what would that be like? What would that be like? Oh my God, that sounds really... Also is what Sandra and I often talk about, the passing statement. A passing statement is client says something that it's almost like they're like, let's move on now. Let's move it on swiftly. Right? There's that passing statement. But that passing statement, even though it's said with no emotion, is so loaded with meaning that you almost feel the door slam shut and you think, I better go in there. It's a passive statement, but it's, even though it's sort of not emotionally loaded, because we keep talking about emotional handles and attachment handles. Attachment handles are things that signify significance, as in they're somehow saying this person is important, this thing is important, this matters to me, there's a threat here for me. Those are the attachment handles, right? There's a longing embedded in that statement. But listen out for the passive statement. Those ones are really interesting because they're emotionally loaded. They're meaning loaded. They're not emotionally loaded. But if you go in there and you repeat it and you say, can we stay here for a moment? Because when you said blah, 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 that felt really important. You see the person start to well up. Sometimes I use it, I'll talk about next time, I'll use the passing statement in an enactment and then it will flush out the emotion, because actually it was meaning loaded. The emotion just needed to be flushed, brought forward. So now I was bringing up the last letter in the acronym is C. That's client's own words and images, right? We've talked about that, but let's look at the simple, soft, slow. Sue has been talking a lot about getting granular. And I have actually, for myself, extended the RISK acronym. So there are 4 S's: simple, soft, slow, specific. Because that's what it means to be granular. Specific means if you are tracking the body, you would want to know what specific part of the body is the person feeling it. If you are tracking the trigger, what is it that tells you that your partner is disappointed? What is it in her tone? The person says, oh, it's her tone of voice. You say, what is it about her tone of voice? You're getting really specific and concrete. So I've really extended that acronym for myself, because the more I think about specific, when somebody makes a statement that's too abstract, I think, well, what does that really mean? Can you say a little bit more? What does that really mean for you? I want to know, what is this specific experience of this person? In other words, if you drop me in the room with that person without telling me, I would be able to say, this is what this is. This is what sadness is like for this person. This is what, shame or fear is like for this person. So that's kind of what we're trying to, that's the how of emotion. And we're always trying to access some kind of vulnerability. And the vulnerability when it comes to attachment is you long to have a connection with this person. That already is vulnerable. It's because to have a longing means you may well not have that longing met. So having longings, allowing yourself to have longings, many of us learn not to have longings because we learned somehow that it was painful because it's not going to be met. So having a longing, I'm always listening out for longings. I'm always listening out for pain points or fear points, things that suggest this is a bit hard, this is a bit difficult, this is a bit uncomfortable. We're always listening out for that, and that's where we go in. And if you say, what do you do when you're there? Stay there, reflect it, repeat it, ask something more specific about it, validate it, conjecture around it. So that's sort of accessing emotions and working with primary emotions. And then, of course, we're always trying to link it back to the cycle. We're always trying to link it to how it plays out between the couple, what they do with it and how it impacts their partner. And always trying to make a distinction between what people do with their emotions and the actual intent. So when I shut down, I'm just trying to protect my relationship from escalation. That's my intent. That makes it easy for me as a therapist to say something like, yes, of course you shut down because you don't want things escalating. And when you shut down, you can't find him, you feel shut out, and then you get even louder, and then you shut down even more. And actually, the sad thing is, both of you are really trying to help the relationship. You're trying to help by stopping things escalating, and you're trying to help by connecting and reaching him, but you're poking him and you're pushing, just kind of shuts you down even more. This is really sad for both of you, right? Because you're both trying to do something for the relationship. That's how you put it back in the cycle, by flushing out the intent of the behaviors. Now, that's me. I want to bring you all back. Who would like to ask a question, make a comment, observe something, share something about you and how you work that helps the process of working with emotions? I'd like to hear from all of you, whoever wants to. Yes.
On the chat, Helena, Nick makes a comment, Nick Porras makes a comment. For me, being more granular is also about helping clients understand that there are many different instances of emotion that they experience.
Lovely, exactly. And where's Nick? Nick, come and join us. Say a little bit more, please. Where's Nick?
Hi.
Hi.
I should be on now. Hi. This is only something fairly new to me that I've been exploring around the different instances of fear or sadness or happiness and joy, because it's very, very easy to get stuck into feeling fear and thinking there's only one type of fear. So then our response is to fight or to run, whereas there can be many different types of fear. So when we misread a cue, for example, from our partner, so if we have that look, we see that look, and then suddenly we see it as danger.
Yes.
That they don't want us anymore, and maybe we catastrophize it, and we only have one version of that feeling.
Yes.
Because that's all we've learned through our past experiences. Then there's only one response. Whereas if we can unpack it, break it down, and realize that sometimes it can, fear or anger, there's so many different instances of anger. So there's anger which is appropriate to get loud and shout.
Yes.
And there's also anger that you might just go quiet, or you might laugh in response to anger, or you might have to take a step back. I mean, that's just something I've been trying to bring into it.
I love that. It's like getting specific about the different instances and kinds of fear you can have. Right? Like that there isn't one fits all kind of fear. That there are, different triggers trigger different kinds of fear.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's how, especially when someone's on the lower level of the emotional scale, that they're not going to have many different versions of an emotion. And I think culturally, or in terms of the ideas around emotion, is that there's just anger and there's sadness and there's joy, but actually anger is there are many instances of anger. It's not just one emotion, it's not just one sadness, it's it's not just one happiness. That joy when you have the sun warming your body, if you can notice that and label it, name it, it gives you a richness.
And it extends your vocabulary of how you describe your emotions, right? And I think what I really love about what you're doing, that is, again, you're expanding that channel for the person to notice their different kinds of happiness, their different kinds of anger, because it can be very simple to say, oh, there's secondary anger, which is just reactive to the primary, and then there is primary. But within each, there are different instances, there are different ways.
Yeah.
And that would also be expanding that channel, because you're making them more curious about it. Yeah, great.
And I found that introducing that concept, so some psychoeducation, especially when someone is in that place where I don't feel anything, I don't notice anything, there's nothing going on in my body, there's even numbness doesn't feel like anything. If you introduce them, I found that introducing the idea that there could be many different versions, so and maybe sometimes shift away just to help them as a tool to maybe say, like that example of the sun, for example. And it enables them to explore outside of the session as well.
I really like that. I really like that. Lovely.
Okay.
That was very helpful, Sarah. Yeah.
Just something else on chat from Bethan saying, being embodied as therapists, we invite the client into the embodied space. If we meet the client from only our cognitive part, we're not being congruent.
Absolutely. Right. Because where, emotions are contagious. So if you're not in your body and you're not aware of your body, you will not even be fully aware of what you're picking up or what you're sending out to the client. If we're stressed by our client's reactivity, they can usually also pick that up, right? They can also sense what was going on for us. So it's a shared space. That's such a good point, Bethan. It's a shared space, and there's a channel that that's blocked if we're not embodied enough, I really resisted focusing for a long time, but it was this point that Bethan that made me realize, okay, Elena, you've got to get in the body. Right. Thank you. Yeah. And Mary Claire. Oh, sorry, Mary Claire, then Richard, yes?
I was going to say, for so many couples, and I seem to have a kind of pattern of these kind of walled off or culturally silenced men. And I think very often that fear around expressing emotion that probably started a very long time ago, and having to really work with that and the fear that they experience of a partner's emotion, and how that response has been embedded over such a long time. And then in sessions, you're trying to kind of create that safe place for them to experience a healthy anger or joy or all of the range, because I think so often there's a sense of learning very early on to contain, and I think that can be so painful, and is such a rich experience, but can also be a very frightening experience for them.
No, absolutely. And what you're talking about there is just how sometimes the partner just expressing emotion is a threat. Good or bad.
Absolutely.
Right?
Too much.
Good or bad. It's just overwhelming. And, to really validate. I mean, one of the things I say so much is, it's like, I just have a sense that no one ever held you in your feelings, right? And this is big, right?
Yeah. Because I seem to have a pattern. I mean, it's come up too many times, but of a partner saying, she's too much. And actually, of course, it's because they cannot access that piece. They go to overwhelm. It does seem to be a bit of a pattern anyway.
Right. So now that's actually you're reminding me of something I wanted to say that I forgot, which was helpful. And then Richard and then Sarah, right? Because what you're reminding me of that I wanted to say is we shouldn't be afraid to track the impact of a partner's behavior or coping strategy on their partner. So we shouldn't be afraid to say something like, and I'm just thinking of all the sessions I had this week, I practically had to say it, which was, what happens for you when you see her tears?
Yeah.
What happens for you when her voice, when she gets louder? Now, you may think, what happens for you when she asks you these questions? Now, you may think, oh, I'm going to shame the partner, I'm going to make it hard. But the whole goal of placing things in the cycle is whatever we say or do, our behavior has an impact on our partner. And, as long as we come in with kindness and empathy and validation and hold to people, we need to move in and track the impact. What happens for you when he leaves the room and shuts the door on you? What happens when you hear this? What happens when she says that? We shouldn't be afraid to track the impact, because that's what couples are struggling with. They're struggling with the impact of their behaviors, how they perceive their partner, how their partner behaves. We're trying to, above the line, the infinity loop, we're trying to change perceptions. Your partner is not indifferent, your partner is not the enemy. But also we're trying to help people see that the behaviors have a different intention from the impact they're having. So your heart's beating, your heart's racing, and actually your partner is crying for joy. I've had that. right? So don't be afraid to track impact, because that's what couples can't talk about safely. That when I hear your voice go around, what I say, go like when your voice starts to go louder, I start to think, oh no, she's coming at me, she's going to get me, and that's when I shut down. You know, we need to have this open, safe conversation. Great. Then Richard.
Right. Hi. What I wanted to ask about was in the exploring about the appraisal that someone makes of their partner. Sometimes it sort of becomes clear that their appraisal is something that they've imagined, you know, that's really real for them, and the partner.
It's a projection, but it's real for them. Is that what you mean?
And just how you go about managing that, because it can be quite a surprise when something really, really feels absolutely true, and then you're kind of, you know, when you find out that it's not, and how that's processed. I'm just wondering how you do that.
Right, so you're saying, you know, it can be a challenge when somebody's appraisal or attribution towards their partner, projection, is so real for them.
Yes, I mean, for years they've basically responded in a certain way because they had an appraisal that their partner was out to get them or hated them or what have you. Yeah.
And to have that challenged, right, it's like, if that can be shifted, that's the power of the work you're doing, right? To help them actually be aware of their appraisals and where it comes from, what triggers their appraisal, right? Like, and sadly, everything their partner has done has reinforced their appraisal.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if every time your partner leaves the room, you conclude, see, I don't matter. Every time they leave the room, it's reinforced their appraisal, right?
Yes, it has.
And so to shift that and to kind of go, oh, wow, he leaves the room because he thinks he feels inadequate, or she feels inadequate. She's never going to, there's no way she's going to be able to be heard in this. That's quite like, whoa, because our appraisal feels so real for us, right?
Yes.
And this links to what I was saying about to Mary Claire, about not being afraid to check the impact. So the way we can do that in a non-blaming way, I don't know how you do yours, Richard, right? But the way I would do that in a non-blaming way is I would say, so when, and then I'll place what they are telling me, the trigger. Like, so whenever Richard leaves the room, you say to yourself, there you go, he doesn't care about me, right? And that's when you get loud and angry. Yeah, because of course, Richard leaving the room says to you, but have you noticed I'm making it very much about you, says to you, means to you, signals to you. What you read into that is, I don't care, he doesn't care about me. So you very much package it as their experience.
When their partner, you know, when it comes out, their partner goes, well, no, I don't think that, or whatever. Like, what I'm saying is that I kind of feel the tenderness of knowing what that's like to really believe it's true. And when your partner's sort of like on the cognitive channel saying, no, I don't, that isn't what's going on. And they tend to go for a cognitive, almost like power over, rather than, wow, I didn't realize that was your experience. And that was what it was like. Sometimes I find those interactions a bit tricky to know how to
hold them, because they are tricky, right? They're in such different places. You're very right. It's a very tricky, delicate moment in therapy. Yeah. And, you know, think about what Richard is saying too is, if every dysfunction has a function, that appraisal has helped that person. That's helped them make sense of the experience. It's kind of like, it's kind of grounded them in some ways and helped them make sense of the experience. So to let that go is a very destabilizing thing, isn't it? To let go of an appraisal that has helped you make meaning of your situation. So thank you. That you're pointing to something so important, that we should hold those moments with tenderness, right? When your key assumptions about yourself and your partner are being revised or shaken up. Yeah. Thank you. And Sarah, yeah?
I wonder if that kind of moment is a lovely moment for your beautiful seeding, which you described so brilliantly in your dissertation. That this has saved you, this has helped you. You could never imagine for a moment that your partner would be doing this in order to protect the relationship. So, you know, like bringing in the seeding kind of idea there.
Beautiful, bringing in the you can never imagine, and then you tuck in the new information that has just been uprooted, right, from your work that you're doing. Thank you so much for reminding me of that, Sarah. You would have thought I didn't write that. But that is so important, right? Like, you could never, catch this, you could never imagine that. And then the new thing that they cannot imagine, the new thing you guys have actually accessed in therapy. Wow, because that he or she is trying to protect the relationship when you've always said to yourself, he doesn't care about me, she doesn't care about me. Yeah, this is quite new. What's happening even right now as you, so then you bring it into the present moment, because you don't want it to be cognitive. You want it to be processed, to be an experience, a new experience that's processed. Beautiful, thank you.
I just come in and
say
something. Richard, if I got it, I think you're referring to that difficult moment, and I experience this sometimes, where the other partner has said something feeling and emotional, and then you go to the more cognitive partner and you ask for a response, if I'm getting what you're saying, and then sometimes they give a really cognitive response and you kind of, your heart sinks inside. And I don't know whether I'm catching it for you, Richard, but I think technique wise that can be a moment that there's a sort of a little bit of catching a bullet there. But even though my heart sinks when that happens and I can feel a little frustrated with the more cognitive partner, what I feel reassured is I'm going to go to them and say, right, so I'll reference the partner for them, and I'll say, yes, your partner just took a risk here, and somehow you heard it like this. Can you tell me more?
So that's nice, great. And now, I so love everybody. This is a practice group, everybody bring in their input, how they work. Yeah, so that was helpful, Nick. Did you all hear that? Great.
Could I ask something?
Yeah, Greta.
Yeah. It's so much, well, all of this is really working with our hearts, working with our clients. And I just like to say that sometimes when I feel like there's a block, when I feel like I'm fearful of touching, you know, I'm fearful that I might harm my client in some way if I repeat what I'm hearing or repeat what I'm feeling about what they're saying or expressing. But sometimes I have to really look into myself, because what's blocking that is me, because actually there are times when I find I am prejudiced, when there are things I kind of don't like, or
so can I join the Me Too movement? That is so honest and real. Can I join the Me Too movement? That happens for me.
Yes. Yeah.
What is beautiful is you noticing it.
Yeah, well, I just feel it's so important because it's so much part of it, you know, like, and it's me that gets in the way. Not always, but often, yeah.
I just think that you've brought on something that's so important and key, right? We are definitely an instrument in the room. And I know that, you know, that affects the process as well. And, you know, sometimes we have to offer ourselves self-compassion, because in that moment, we can't. We just can't, for whatever reason, but we've made a note of what's going on for us.
Yeah. But also sometimes if we can remember to take it back to ourselves in the moment and recognize what's going on, it's possible to move past it then.
And you remind me, no, absolutely. And you remind me of something before we close down. You remind me of something Gail Palmer once said to me. She said, you know, if I'm finding it hard, if I'm judging the client in any way, then I know I have an empathy problem.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's about bringing it back to us. It's not the client, it's I'm having an empathy problem. I have to dig a bit deeper to find that place, right? It's not the client, it's me not digging deep. Because if I really try and put myself in the client's shoes, there is a way to make sense. But we have to hold the fact that we can't always do that. Now, I'm aware that in a minute we're finishing. A minute.
A minute. Oh my God.
Yes, and I just really want to say thank you to everybody for participating. We don't have time for a checkout, but can I say next week we have Sarah doing her reading group, chapter 5 of Stepping into EFT, and then we have a 1-week break, and then, oh, I can't wait for this. Sandra does a session on slicing it thinner, slowing it down. I mean, really, does it get better than this? And then we are going to come back after that and do enactments. And I really hope I have time to talk about enactments in EFT, how you enact with parts of self, not just with partners. I think that's the new exciting bit learning I'm doing at the moment. And then we're going to talk about dealing with defensive responses, see how far we get with the rest of the skills, because then we have one more, Sarah, and then we're finished. And we're hoping that after that, everything returns to normal. Is that a pipe dream? Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very
It's
much,
so lovely.
Thanks, Helena.
Thank you very much. Brilliant session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So nice to see all your faces.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Bye.
Sally.
Thanks so much, Helena.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks a lot.